Gonzales is a prisoner in Texas. If the state has its way, he'll be dead within the hour. This is Execution Watch. Huntsville, Texas, death penalty capital of the Western world, where prison staff is prepared to overdose. During the next hour, KPFT's Execution Watch will air live coverage of the killing in Texas, the state that carries out a third of all U.S. executions. Execution Watch host Marlo Blue, criminal defense attorneys Larry Douglas and Meryl Pontier. Huntsville report outside the death house, Linda Snyder with Allie Sullivan. General reporter Clinton Young. And an exclusive interview with Gonzales. Ramiro Gonzales begins.
Good evening. Tonight, the state of Texas ushers Ramiro Gonzales into the death chamber. To our listeners around the world, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, June the 26th, 2024 edition of Execution Watch. I'm Marlo Blue. If you're tuning in for Western World scheduled time slot, Execution Watch is produced by a dedicated staff of volunteers. We report live each and every time an execution is scheduled in the state of Texas. The live video stream of this show can be found right now on our Execution Watch Facebook page and simulcast on HoustonMediaSource.org. During tonight's broadcast, we will be giving you details about the case, including background surrounding the trial and conviction. And breaking news regarding any last-minute judicial action. And we will hear from our newest reporter, who himself is a former death row inmate. Tonight, the state of Texas will execute Ramiro Gonzales for a 2001 murder. Gonzales, 41, was convicted and sentenced to death in 2006 for the sexual assault and killing of 18-year-old Bridget Townsend in Medina County. Court arguing in part he should be ineligible for the death penalty under state law because he is no longer dangerous. Joining us first tonight is our reporter stationed outside of the death house in Huntsville, Texas, activist Linda Snyder. Hello, Linda. Thank you for joining us. Any news? We are trying to connect with Linda Snyder at the moment. Linda, any news?
Not yet. It's sad. Everybody's sad. There seems like there's a lot of mix-up tonight. Even though they put some posters up of the victim out here. When we got here, the posters were up about them. We took them down.
What do you mean mix-up?
Well, they put the posters out for the victim. They put the victim's pictures out here on our side.
Oh, I see.
On posters.
I see. Well, we understand that there's a lot of European interest in this particular case.
People from England, we've got people from here. I've met both of those teams.
And did they tell you why they were particularly interested in this execution?
Well, it's pretty high profile, because of his change. And they don't believe in the death penalty, so they're trying to show the world.
Who else do you see protesting outside of the death house tonight?
Who is protesting? We've got the whole abolition friends of Ramiro's are out here. They're on the other side, though, from us.
There's been a lot of focus on the question of redemption in this particular case. Why is that important in a case like Ramiro's?
Well, because he has really changed. I mean, he has changed from when he first came in. He was an angry young man, and he's not angry anymore. And the guys really look up to him. You know
most of these people. You have talked with them. You've spent time with these men. Did you have a relationship with Ramiro?
Yes, I used to visit him all the time, but then his family started coming around. And so he was, he had to take people off his list because he didn't have any family at first. And all of a sudden, they all wanted to be on his list. So I understand that. I'd rather have their family with them.
Do you mind explaining to our listeners, especially a certain amount of contact with a certain amount of people? How does that work?
people on their list.
Can you say that again, dear?
They're only allowed 10 people on their list.
Let's see. Let me ask you another question. Do you know who is standing witness for Mr. Gonzales?
His cousin, I know for sure, but I'm not sure who else. Nobody seems to know.
And for the listeners around the world, is taking place or about to begin?
All of the people to come across the street. They're on this side of the street where I'm on. They will cross the street and go up into the death house. So that's when we tell you that they're coming across.
Are there any other signals you might be keeping an eye out for tonight?
We're just watching to make sure that, everybody on our side is against the death penalty.
Right, and not, okay, I understand.
No, except that I love him, and I wish that he could still be here. I'm going to be sad not to be able to see his smiling face when I walk past him, and he's behind the glass, but I always wave. He waves at me, blows me a kiss, and I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss that smile.
Well, thank you so much for doing this for us, and thank you for helping our listeners get a little more humanization about what's happening as Texas executes a prisoner. What's going on? Linda Snyder is reporting to us tonight from outside the Walls Union in Huntsville, Texas, known as the Death House. Of course, we will be checking back in with Linda a little bit later. She's going to let us know as soon as the witnesses cross the road, which indicates that the state of Texas is posed to execute Ramiro Gonzales, Jr. Let's get to our panel right now and get a little bit of feedback on some of the different aspects of the case. Defense attorney Merrill Pontier and Execution Watch reporter Clinton Young, a former death row inmate himself. Larry, explain the case to us.
Well, Marlo, we know that every case is different. This case is a lot different than any I've seen before. Before the facts of this case, before this case even arose, made known to the criminal justice system, Ramiro Gonzales had already been found guilty to life in prison in Bandera County. So while he's still in Bandera County, he wants to talk to the sheriff in Bandera County. So he tells the sheriff, I know about the girl who went missing. The sheriff didn't believe him. So then he persisted and said, I can show you where the body is. So that got the sheriff, this is the Bandera County Sheriff, James McMillan, accompanied Gonzales to the place where Gonzales claimed the body was. So he has Gonzales in the front passenger seat. He's got an assistant in the rear seat, and Gonzales takes him to the area where the ranch where Gonzales lives. So they drove for a while back in the woods. When they left the road, they went on a caliche, a dirt road, gravel road, drove quite a few more miles in to where Gonzales claims the body is. Gonzales is explaining to the sheriff where the body's likely to be, describing some of the jewelry that she had on and so forth, and telling them this is where you're going to find the body. They do indeed find a skull and some of her bones, not any of the ribs or the spinal cord, but then they just go ahead and mark. He believed that she was killed by the Mexican mafia. And then after that, he says, she actually, Bridget Townsend, her boyfriend, had her killed, Joe Leal. So Joe Leal had her killed, and he changes the story several different times. But when they get him back to the station, they then take a statement from him that is used in court against him. This is a confession, so clearly before him is statutory warnings. You have the right to remain silent and not make any statement at all. If you make any statement, it probably will be used against you in court. Having heard all that, Gonzales then gives a videotape confession and a written confession where he outlines the details. And then when he does a written confession, they allow him to review the confession before he signs it. And so all of that evidence in terms of how the shooting occurred and the story that Gonzales tells is that that Bridget Townsend's boyfriend, Leal, is his drug dealer, and that he called to the drug dealer, Leal, to get some drugs. Townsend tells Gonzales that Leal is not there. So Gonzales says in his statement that he then goes to the place and is there by herself, and he tries to steal his drugs. So he goes into the apartment, she lets him in, he ransacks the apartment looking for drugs, found some money, took the money, and then he asked her were there any drugs. She said there was no drugs. Then he kidnaps her and takes her to a deserted area. Before going there, he goes by the ranch house, the trailer where his grandfather lives, gets a rifle to shoot her with. She starts begging for her life, and so from his statement, he then tells him that he has sex with her. And then after having taken her out of her house, in essence kidnapped her, he then has sex with her. She puts her clothes back on, and he shoots her and leaves her right where he left her, right where he shot her. So the state then puts on a case using pretty much the evidence that they got from him, which is not enough. They have to corroborate that evidence. And she said she was getting ready to go to work that morning. The next morning, she was going to sleep in, go to sleep. I get home, and I think she's asleep on the sofa. She's not there. I think she's in the bed, but she's not there either. So he then starts calling people around to find out where is she, including calling Gonzales, who says, I never saw her, didn't see her at all. That was the primary evidence against him. Did testify that when he came home, his house had been gone through. Somebody had stolen some of the money. And when he gets to trial, the lawyer for him has an investigator and an expert and others who got information from Gonzales's family regarding his trial coming up. And the expert testified based on the information that he received from the family, and also interviewing Gonzales, I believe, including the fetal alcohol syndrome issue. He brought all that up. But after having brought all of that information up in terms of his defense, the jury found mitigation evidence presented on behalf of Leal, on behalf of Gonzales. But again, even with the mitigation evidence, the jury did make an affirmative finding that there was a likelihood of future danger, and that's really the issue right now in the case. Now, since the case has been the state's witness expert regarding future danger says now that today I would not make that. So that's where we are here today.
Tell us a little bit too about anything as far as appeals go, and is there anything that he possibly can pull a rabbit out of his hat for this?
Well, there's no rabbit, no hat right now, and I think Merrill is going to talk about the
Let's go to you, if you don't mind, Merrill.
Ramiro's giving his last statement. We will know for sure when it's over.
Miss Linda, if you don't mind muting yourself, we're going to come back to you in just a few minutes.
Everybody except
let's go to Merrill
everybody
first.
except Merrill mute.
And for our listeners on the FM channel, I'm sorry if you're getting double streams. I apologize. We are working to correct that immediately. Merrill, tell us what you know about the appellate situation.
Yeah, so Ramiro actually filed his first writ application in 2008 about a CCA. He then went to federal court and actually asked the federal court to stay federal proceedings so he could go back to state court and file a subsequent writ application. And he did that in 2011, and he presented an ineffective assistance of counsel claim including the failure of his trial attorneys to present an expert about the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, the failure to, and he also said that the trial court made a mistake in allowing testimony on future dangerousness, and that future dangerousness issue has been a constant factor in all his appeals. This writ application was dismissed as an abuse of the writ, so that means it did not fulfill the requirements in the law. But what was kind of unique about it is that the court, based on this subsequent writ application, reopened the first writ. The claim was made that the judge in the first writ was not authorized to sign the recommended findings of fact and conclusions of law. So that first writ was actually reopened while this second writ was denied. And so he went back to state court to have that issue resolved. The issue was resolved because I guess they authorized the judge to sign. And so he signed the exact same findings, which were to deny relief. And so that was sent to the CCA. And so the CCA, a habeas petition, federal court. He had 9 claims, including IAC and, the other claims that he presented in state court. But the federal courts denied him. He then had an execution date in 2022, July 13. And so he filed a second subsequent writ application in that same year. His claims were false and inaccurate expert testimony at trial, false testimony from a jail inmate at the punishment phase. There's a national consensus that the death penalty is excessive for people who were 21 or younger at the time of the crime. He actually won on one claim, and that was sent back to the trial court, and that was the claim about false testimony by the expert on future dangerousness, because that same expert now said that Ramiro was not a future danger. And so all those years before, during trial, he said, yeah, it was a future danger, and that expert now got back. But the court did not remand on that one. The court only remanded on the fact that the same expert said he testified about some recidivism rates, and those were actually false. And the CCA said the fact that that same expert, all those years later, now thinks Ramiro is not a future danger is actually not relevant, because that evaluation is made at the time of trial. And if someone changes years later, CCA. So they sent it back based on those recidivism rates that were false. And he actually was denied on that claim ultimately again. Then, of course, because of the current execution date, he filed a third subsequent writ application in this month, actually. And he filed 2 claims. The first one is that he does not pose a risk of danger to anybody, so therefore he's not death eligible on a prediction of future dangerousness. And this writ was denied by the CCA.
Thank you so much, Meryl. Let's bring in Clinton Young at this point in time. Clinton, give us a couple of your observations specifically about Ramiro. Did you know him?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I knew when he first came down there, right?
Right.
He changed a lot as he got older. We wasn't, and I believe this is even mentioned in the clemency video, we wasn't friends because things that occurred whenever we both first got there. But no matter what, I've seen the changes that he made as he got older, became more religious, found purpose in his life, found his own worth, bad backgrounds, abusive childhoods, poverty, etc. And so they're a manifestation of their environment. And he was given an opportunity to change and become a better person. Some people choose not to change in prison. Some people choose to change. He made the choice to change.
Well, there's a lot of talk in this particular case about redemption. And is redemption, if you have a change in heart, is it really different? Do you become a different person? What was your observation?
I think people do change. I mean, I've seen a lot of people down there change, become better people. I mean, the weight of what they did empathetic and sympathetic to other people, right?
Right.
They don't look to continue a pattern of victimization. Some people change faster than others. It took myself, you know, I was a rascal too when I was down there. But a lot of us get down there when we're young. He got down there when he was young too. I was there when I was 19. I think he was 20 or 21, something like that, when he got down there. And so who we are at 41, 40, 38, 39, we're not the same people we was at 18, 19, and 20 years old.
Well, yeah, definitely.
And so that's why when his lawyers reached out to me, at first when his lawyers reached out to me and they asked me to participate in the clemency video, which I'm never going to hate on anybody. I don't care what our history was on death row. One thing everybody down there knows about me, they're like, I'm going to fight the system, period, right? So I'm not going to take problems from in there out here and then try to tear anybody down or hate on anybody there, no matter how much I didn't like them or anything. And so when his lawyers first reached out to me, at first I was like, are you sure? When Meryl asked me, I said, are you sure they were talking about me? But they was like, yeah, you. And so when I got to talking to his attorneys, I had a better understanding of why they reached out to me, right? And I was able to honestly sit down and participate in it and ask that he receive clemency, because I did believe, and I do believe, that the person he is today is not the person he was back then. While I'm not going to hate on him, I wouldn't go out of my way to help him.
Right.
You know, because if they put him in population and something happens, it's like, hey, I got a conscience too, right? You know what I'm saying? So, but I do believe that, man. I believe he's one of the people that, you know, faith made him a better person. Unfortunately, the state of Texas's position more often than not is Jesus forgives, we don't.
It's a very interesting relationship that they have with religion in this particular case. That is absolutely for sure. And undefined, or defined as to what they want it to be to fit whatever purposes they are doing. If you don't mind, right now, let's bring in Allie Sullivan. Allie Sullivan is with the Death Penalty Action. Kiris, are you there? Can you talk a little bit about Ramiro?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course, dear. Tell us a little bit about Ramiro.
I mean, a lot of it has been said already, that Ramiro is a vastly different person than the person who killed Bridget Townsend in 2001. And I study anthropology, and anthropology teaches us to understand people how they see themselves, and not just be views and your own interpretations. And I think that is really important in this case. It's been talked a lot about Ramiro's incredible transformation since being on the row. And it's just absolutely devastating that the context of what happened to Ramiro and the person he has become is completely being ignored in this instance. And in many instances, those of us who have been privileged to know and to love Ramiro, know how big of a heart he has and how much concern he has for the people around him, and even beyond. He really just embodies love and embodies kindness and just helping people. I don't know how better to describe him than that. And I'm at a loss for words, because he's not innocent. He doesn't have one of those kinds of cases, but nobody's disposable, and they're treating Ramiro and others like they are disposable. They are people just like us. We are not all that far removed from them. Many of us go through horrible things, and it doesn't always turn out the way it did in Ramiro's case, but we see this common thread through nearly all death penalty cases of individuals who have endured tremendous abuse and sexual violence and neglect, and you name it.
Ramiro Gonzales, thank you so much for meeting with us.
Sure.
The reason Execution Watch invited you to interview today is we want to find out who you are. The state of Texas spends over $1 million every time they execute someone, over and above what it would cost to imprison them for life. Who is the state killing or proposing to kill? And that's why we invite anyone who has a date to interview with us. And please feel free to talk about whatever you want, because this interview will not be edited and it will not be cut.
Yeah.
So now that I've put you on the spot.
Yeah. No, I'm not on the spot. I'm in the light. No, I think again, this is unscripted. I didn't think about what I wanted to say. I didn't spend time trying to contemplate or sound, rehearsed.
Not required.
Sure. And I think my sole message is for the fellas back here on death row. I'm not gonna complain about the state of Texas or my case or anything connected to that in any degree.
Totally up to you.
Sure. So I think if I remember correctly, in 2021 they had a series of events begin with a Kairos, and Kairos was the genesis of like a God movement. In fact, it was a God movement. Death row has been known to be deprived of many pleasures when it comes to like TVs, human connection, anything that a population would get. So death row, we just barely got the first group rec started a few months ago.
Oh,
so,
what does that look like?
Well, I mean, it's 14 guys who, 7 at a time that are in a single day room. It looks like something I would love to be a part of, but I can see how much, joy and community that those guys get when I see them in the day room.
And up till now, everybody's just been in solitary with no group rec.
I got on death row September the 27th of 2006, and the one thing I was, drilled about was the fact that your expectations for good things on death row are just, a waste of time. So, up until 20, at that time I was moved to Death Watch, September the 14th of 2020. I spent 22 months there. During that time in 2020, I think that...
Why were you moved to Death Watch? You had a date?
An execution date.
Okay.
So it was actually November the 3rd and 4th when Kairos came of that year.
What's Kairos?
Kairos is a group of individuals that come in here, and they basically, it's a 2-day event. They feed the guys, they minister to them, they sing, they give them events.
It's a Christian.
It's a Christian movement.
Okay.
Again, it was unheard of. Daniel Dickerson at that time, who was senior warden, had basically stepped out in faith and said he was going to start this movement. He had the help of the director of chaplaincy, which was Hazelwood, the field ministers, which were brought in. Again, it was unheard of. When they first came into our section on Death Watch, the first thing I told them was, you guys do not want to be in here without an escort, or you're going to get in trouble.
Could you talk about what Death Watch is?
So I think, so Death Watch is where when you get an technically it's 14 days out from your date, but when you get moved to this section with an execution date, you're basically getting moved to Death Watch. So anybody who has an execution is moved to Death Watch.
And how many people? It's a separate section of cells?
It's the same thing. Every section is the same. Death row is nothing different than anything. No section is different than any other. 14 cells. The only difference is they have cameras in the cells. So, and you're obviously constant observation because of the cameras. But, I was moved there in November. They had Kairos. I was not able to be a part of it directly, but indirectly I was able to eat all the food because I had an execution date and I was on Death Watch. And then later that year they started the faith-based program, which consisted of, I think, to start with 6 different programs, and I was able to be involved indirectly with those programs. It was like an 18-month program. I spent 22 months on Death Watch. So when I did get to stay on July
I thought that was a 14-day thing.
No.
Death Watch.
No, Death Watch is, so understand me.
Sorry.
Technically, Death Watch is when you're 14 days out from your execution. This is when they're supposed to give you constant observation.
Right.
But when you get a date, you're moved to the section where they keep people with dates. So we just say death watch because it's the section where they keep the guys with dates.
Okay.
But because the cameras are already there, there's you can't take your camera off, or they can't get them. They can't move them out of there. They can't take the camera out. So we just say death watch in general terms, but technically they shouldn't have the camera on until 14 days out of my execution. So I was able to participate in all the programs that they had started with Faith Base. Eventually, again, I spent 22 months on A section with an execution date.
Is that length of time typical?
Huh?
22 months?
Anyway.
Is that length of time typical to go to Death Watch?
No, I mean, I was the one who spent the longest there so far. I mean, the majority, I think people might spend anywhere from 4 to maybe 6 months there.
Yeah.
But my date was just, there was just set off to set off and set off.
Right,
So,
the shipping delays. What kind of, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what kind of, when you say you're involved in the program, what did the Kairos program consist of?
Well, Kairos is just a 2-day program. They basically come in and feed you food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They 2-day event. They feed you, free world food. During that time, they will, bring in speakers. They will minister to you. They will basically, like you said, a Christian organization that presents God to you. You don't necessarily have to be a Christian or have any religious worldview to attend the event. They just want you to come in and have that experience of, probably more or less on the terms of, community, togetherness, to experience, God's gift of love without prejudice, without bias, just a bunch of group of men coming together, having, breaking bread and speaking about life to life.
Right, and you're not in your separate cells.
No, well, for us, we were still in our cells.
Okay.
Population, they put them in a big gym.
Okay.
It's like 40 at a time. In this case, there was only 14. They just chose a section, and these 14 people were included. Again, because I was on death watch, I was able to participate with the food. Once that was over, they started a faith-based program. On July the 11th, 2023, I was given a stay, and they moved me to the actual faith-based section, which is just 2 sections over.
The faith-based section of Death Row?
Yes. So eventually I completed that, became a graduate, and then, just waited there until eventually they asked me to be a coordinator. So here's my message. It's not for me. It's not for Texas. It's not to complain about Texas. It's not to soapbox Texas. To me, those aren't essential things at all. I think that, the beginning of this thing was a movement of God where we had to choose whether we wanted to be a part of something that was never done. When I became the coordinator on the faith-based section on BPOD, one of the things that I was able to talk about was the fact that we might be, as death row inmates, the deciding factors whether the death penalty is eradicated or not advocates in the world. It might be that when all of death row becomes graduates from this faith-based program, because it's being heard of all the time, people are now starting to question this menace to society, this future danger when we're all graduates. But the fact that we're doing this program is proof enough that we're becoming graduates and that we're more than able to be rehabilitated and that we're being successful in so many other things.
Well, you realize how radical that is in a program like the death penalty that doesn't envision any rehabilitation.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, this is completely contrary-wise to what they say, which is why I say that we might be the deciding factors whether they do away with death penalty, not you. It might be left on our hands, which it's our responsibility to take this opportunity and run with it, to complete the programs, to show people that for our own selves, and not only for that, but we do it for them and we do it for ourselves. This is an opportunity for us to do those things. So, you know, I want the guys to know, especially the two new faith-based sections, you know, put every effort into this program, not only for yourself. And I think one of the greatest gifts with humanity back here is the fact that even if you do not want to participate, even if you don't want to be, you know, intimate with some of the things that are going on in your life that the program actually wants you to be, the fact that you would share your story might be the deciding factor that another individual wants to change.
What sort of stories do people share?
I mean, they're all the same: abuse, neglect, addiction. You know, you guys know the stories. You've been doing this for years. So, you know, I want to make sure that they take this opportunity, not selfishly, but to know that the greater, you know, picture, in the greater, you know, vision of things, that again, we might be the deciding factors whether the death penalty is eradicated or not.
Okay, because of the opportunity to disprove the uh, inability to rehabilitate someone who is death sentenced.
Sure. But even then, it's like doing it for yourself, doing it for your family, proving to yourself. And look, one of the reasons that I set out to do what I did, to become greater, to show people that I could be better than my mistakes, was not only for the victim's family, for my family, but there were a few individuals, in this case, the expert psychiatrist for the state and the prosecutor for the state, who became the driving forces to my change. It was because of them that I wanted to change. Not in a bad way, in a good way, because everything they knew about me was dysfunctional. It wasn't consistent with who I really was. But the fact that they were saying it gave me that drive to become better than what they had envisioned and what they had on paper.
What the real you was capable of.
Sure, and even then, I could exceed even that. You know, it wasn't to prove. It was just to show. I just wanted them to know that everything they knew about me was inconsistent with who I was quintessentially.
Well, didn't the psychiatrist, didn't he participate in a video about you that was on YouTube where he said...
he recanted his statement and came back and said that he reevaluated me and said that he was
Do you
wrong.
recall the name of that video?
Yeah.
What's
the
it called?
video or the psychiatrist?
Oh, the on YouTube, the YouTube video.
I don't know. It's a clemency video.
Something about Ramiro or something. But what's
Clemency
his
video.
name? What's the doctor's name?
Edward Grippon.
How do you
Look,
spell
the guy's
his
the individual's a really good dude.
How do you spell his last name?
Grippon, how it sounds. Gripon.
Okay, because yeah, I saw him in that video.
I mean, he's a very good individual. You know what was amazing is that after we had after we had the evaluation, we had a social conversation about life, his family, his kids, his grandkids. I mean, I can say nothing bad about anybody that was involved in prosecuting my case.
Well, and he also said, he made it very clear in the video that he abandoned his diagnosis, that he said that you are basically rehabilitated.
That was the reason why he was
exactly.
the very first one on my case, on the clemency video, because he recanted his statement.
If anybody watches this and wants to look at that video, I want them to be able to find it.
Yeah, and it's going to be remade. There's going to be some additional stuff on that. It might be my same interview, but with some more interviews or whatever.
Yeah, I wondered about that. When you mentioned that you were a coordinator for the Kairos program on your pod, what does that mean? I mean, because it seems to apply a certain amount of agency on your part.
So a coordinator, by definition, back here would be, you know, three main things. Number one, we would help to coordinate the program within the section, ideas, you know, thoughts, events, you know, group sessions or whatever. Which in this case there would be no group sessions because we are all in cells. Also, that the coordinator would report a lot of things going on, whether bad or good, or if anybody deserves some extra credit, or if anybody, needed to be recognized for whatever. The coordinator would also help to teach the program. One of the qualifications for a coordinator is to be a graduate from the actual faith-based sections.
How do you help teach that from your cell?
You just open your mouth. I mean, you talk. You
And
can.
they can all hear you?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
and there are other ways as well, but I mean, one of the main ways would be from your cell. I think now what they have started to do, if permitted, is they would take they would take the coordinator out of his cell and put him in a day room, or he's able to look at everybody
Okay.
as well.
I can see where
But look,
that would be helpful.
your communication is not restricted.
Okay.
Just because you're in your cell doesn't mean you're restricted at all. We're intellectual beings that are capable of
Of course.
anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We know how to make do with where we're at and what we have.
Communication does occur.
Sure.
Yes.
So communication is we're free to communicate in many ways. So that's not the problem. The problem is participation, transparency when it comes to faith-based. So, which again, my message to the guys, give it everything you got. Don't give up. Be transparent, because every individual in this faith-based program has the greatest potential and purpose to not only achieve but supersede everything that everybody's expected of them. When they do it for themselves, when they do it for others, but essentially when they do it for God, they bring glory to God. They give their own selves the power to be like that. Potential is converted into power to prove to everybody outside of who they are that they can be more, that they can create more, that they can be more than a community, that they can take what they have and be a contribution to the betterment of everybody else.
Now, Ramiro, when you talk about the transparency, what is it? Can you talk more about that when you're urging transparency?
Being honest, being open, because we might have all suffered from drug addiction, but it's not all the same. So, or even if it is, some of the ways that I overcame, or some of the things that I learned throughout, might be able to help somebody who's still addicted in some way. Look, just because we're in prison doesn't mean there's people addicted to drugs in prison. This place has got more drug zombies than you think. I mean,
I've had some people tell me they had trouble avoiding drugs in prison.
my hat's off to Daniel Dickerson. This man I pray for. He's regional Dickerson now, but he did some amazing things back here, and he deserves much of the credit. All credit goes to God, but God used this man. But it's hard to eradicate the drugs from a prison society. Do I think it can be done? Absolutely. Do I think there's a lot of effort put into it? Absolutely not. But I think that it could be much better. But there's still drugs back here, and avoiding it is sometimes hard to do. For me, it's just saying no. It's screwed up my life. It's one of the reasons why I'm here, and I don't need it. I don't want it. For others, they might have an issue where it's hard to say no. So what can I say? What can I contribute to them in helping them to face, confrontation when it comes to when somebody comes to the door, or whatever. How do I say no? How can you help me to overcome my addictions or my problems, whatever it may be? It doesn't have to be drugs. It can be anything.
Plenty of things. We're going to have to stop in just a little bit. Believe it or not, it's been 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you want to say, or somebody you want to shout out to?
Yeah, the guys back here. I wish I could say I did everything good back here, and it's not this far from the truth. But for the guys that I still have, maybe I said something or did something wrong. I apologize. I'm sorry, and I hope one day I'll be able to repay it back. For the rest of them, you know, what we say in Spanish, ánimo, like, you know, keep going. Don't lose hope. Don't stop learning how to love and love others. Don't stop showing mercy. When you have it, give it if you can. Make every effort to walk in the complete potential and purpose that you have as a human being. Don't let anything or anybody define you other than who you are. Just keep keeping on, you know.
Ramiro Gonzales, thank you so much for
Sure.
talking with us.
Thank you.